What if I told you there is no difference? There's no difference between you and the drunk bum stumbling down the sidewalk on a wet, rainy night. There's no difference between you and the meth addict stealing money for his next hike from an old, defenseless lady. There's no difference between you and the straight A student who knows 3 languages, the cure to cancer, and to war hunger. There's no difference between you and me.
Thank you all for coming and sitting down and chatting about how British literature affects us here in Chicago in the 21st century. We just heard a poem that starts with the line, "What if I told you there is no difference?" How do you feel about that, and how do you think the Chicago public feels about that if they hear those words?
Well, I think they wouldn't like it at all. I think even you see it in school, right? It begins in school where nobody likes to be wearing the same outfit as anyone else in the class, or I'm sure the executive that walks around in his suit downtown would never want to compare it to a homeless person. And so I think there is this pressure to be individual and to stand out. If you want to get a job, you know, you have to stand out with what you do in your curriculum and like everything. So, and then Robert Burns kind of like speaks into this.
He does, into a louse. He actually has words which I'll read. He says, "I would some power the gift to give us, to see ourselves as others see us. It would free many a blunder free us, and foolish notion, what errors in dress and gat we'd leave us, in even devotion." So in the poem, Burns is writing from a poor man's perspective, and he sees a louse on a rich lady, or a lady in front of the church, and the louse doesn't see the difference. And what it's talking to is, like in Chicago, we shouldn't see that gap. We shouldn't see a difference between the person perhaps on the street and the person that are walking past in their rich attire or their fancy cars as they drive.
Well, I think in a lot of ways we see kind of a difference in culture from what he's trying to hint at in this poem, in that we lack value for people. And we have such a high esteem of ourselves, like he's saying, you know, to see ourselves as others see us. Really, if we humbled ourselves, and then I think it helps us to see other people as more valuable than we do.
I think that that is not something that we can achieve on our own, though. Although the world would like to make us think that we can, kind of like what Blake talks about in his poem.
I think it's interesting because in Blake, he talks about the poetic genius. He talks about how important it is to find who you are inside. And a lot of times that's kind of how we approach society. We talk about, you do you, girl. Just gotta find who you are inside and just follow your dreams. And that's the way that we approach life. I feel like it's part of what makes it so that we look at people as different than ourselves.
Well, he certainly hits on that in his piece, All Religions Are One. It says, "As all men are alike, though infinitely various, so all religions and as all similars have one source. The true man is the source, he being the poetic genius." And so it's just this idea that you are a god, you know, your inner energy is a god. And so why hold back on anything? Why prevent anything from, you know, any desire you want?
And this idea is not necessarily new. Like we were hearing from you about the phrases like "girl, you do you," but this has come also from our Disney movies that we grew up with, like Pocahontas. Follow your heart. Just have no restraints. Do what your heart desires.
I think we certainly see this too, just in like expressions of sexuality is a big one in culture today. You know, do whatever suits you. You know, find what your needs are, and find yourself in sexuality, in wealth, in relationships, whatever it is. And we just see kind of the brokenness that brings.
It's interesting because that's something that we see in a lot of poets, but Coleridge hates it. Like, he talks so specifically against it, and I think it would be interesting just to think about that. Just, I don't know, it's interesting because it's different than what we see in a lot of the other media today.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Human beings are not pretty. unlike what we usually like to think, that there is some inherent like goodness in us. And so Coleridge kind of like realized this, and in his poem Epitaph, he says, "Stop, Christian passerby, stop, child of God, and read with gentle breast. Beneath the sod a poet lies, or that which once seemed he. O lift one thought in prayer for STC, that he who many a year with toil of breath found death in life, may here find life in death. Mercy for praise, to be forgiven for fame, he asked and hoped, though Christ, do thou the same." So for Coleridge, we see that for him, it was, and in his poem, Pains of Sleep, he talks about how he can't find rest even in sleep. All the things that he'd done in his life just continue to haunt him. And I think that is the sad reality of a lot of people in our society today. They are haunted by the things that they have done and they can't find rest. And many of them, like Coleridge, have attempted to pray to God and feel like they have no answer.
I think it's also something so applicable to here in Chicago. We're moody students. We walk by homeless people on the street every day, and they know that we're moody students. But we just walk by because we have somewhere to go or we have things to do, when in reality, they may have the same ideas. I had a terrible life. I've had a living hell, and you're just walking past without even giving me a glance. You're not even willing to pray for me or to talk to me.
There is a big contrast. I think there's a contrast here between rich and poor, but also we're Christian. And Coleridge touches that in his poem. He's asking the Christians to pray for him because he can't find the rest. He can't find that connection with God. And we do need to be that. So how can, with this information, how can we do that? How can we give of ourselves or give of God through what we've learned here?
I think that we need to be fearless when we approach people and be countercultural in the way that we do so. As Brody was saying, and we were just talking about how people are just trying to follow their inner God and just be fearless in approaching them and bringing the truth, which is what will actually bring them rest.
I think uplifting this individuality as a good thing, there's actually benefit to that. But instead of it being man-centered, rather teaching that your individuality comes from God, comes from the fact that you're made in the image of God, and saying that in your pursuits to find purpose in yourself, it's really bringing more brokenness. But in your attempt to find who God made you to be, there's hope.
Well, thank you guys for staying or coming to sit down and chat. I think you can all agree that we have learned from British literature and have learned how it affects our world here today. And may we go and show God and show who He is to the world.
In a world longing for acceptance, yet proclaiming the importance of individuality, we hate to hear the word same.
In a society where everyone wants to look the best, have the best, and be the best, we fill our lives with the pursuit of frivolous things. That leaves us worse than we were before.
See, the truth of the matter is that we are all the same. At the core of our beings, we yearn for the same thing that should bring us all to our knees in awe.
Our wretched insides, in dark, deep caves, long for the light of something not of this world. What we need is the same.
You and I.
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 We need redemption.